You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Senator Deidre Henderson and former State Representative Rebecca Chavez-Hout. Great to have both of you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Busy week up on the Hill, highlighted probably by the tax reform bill. Yeah. Huge tax reform bill, more than 250 pages, so there's a lot to go through there. But here's what we know. It seeks to lower the rate and broaden the base. In general, your thoughts on that concept?
Well, we've got to do something. Right now we have a shrinking sales tax base. Our tax policy really was enacted in the 1930s and it's outdated. We've got to modernize it. Consumers are trending more toward a service-based economy rather than products, and right now we really only tax certain products. So we've got to do something in order to maintain as low a rate as possible on and keep our revenues to the government stable, while also making sure that our citizens have some stability as well.
Your thoughts?
So I think looking at equalizing how individuals and how different taxpayers pay their rates is something that always is beneficial to look at. But I do have concerns about the end user and how that affects consumers in the long run. As we all know, businesses pass along those hits whenever they have to deal with tax increases to their consumers, their customers. And we have to look at which services are utilized by individuals on the lower economic strata. So always I'm concerned about how that will impact it. And then some of the other elements related to the EITC are very good on one hand, but again, if we're looking at income tax, that's the money that goes to our school children, and that gives us some pause.
Senator, as we look at this, what are we expecting to see the basic impact of not only individuals but the business community as well?
Well, right now we're going, and the bill is new and it will change. It's going to go to committee tomorrow where I expect that it will change. It's a House bill. It'll probably come over to the Senate if it passes the House sometime next week. And I think what we're seeing right now is a sales tax rate that's going from 4.75% down to 3.1%. So it's a cut in the overall tax rate. But on a wider swath of products and services. But we're hoping to keep it revenue neutral so that nobody's paying more than they were before.
So when we talk about it's going to change, what is going to be happening over the next couple of weeks in regard to this bill? I imagine a lot of people are going to be ascending on Capitol Hill and saying, this is how it's going to impact our industry, and this is why we want you to consider a change.
Well, I think that's what always gives us, as, those of us who were previously legislators, concern is it's the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and we'll have to see how that manifests itself in terms of any changes. What the senator mentioned in terms of trying to equalize the impact on industries and services. Will that maintain? Will that be maintained? That is a question yet to be answered.
One of the things I'm hearing frustration from different industries is, I know we've been talking about this for a long time, right? However, this bill is coming out 2 weeks before the end of the session. As I already mentioned, 250 pages plus. So what about the process? Is there reason to be concerned about the process and trying to rush this through in the final weeks?
Well, I think you always need to be concerned that you've got a good and open and fair process where bills can be debated and people have the opportunity to come and express their opinions. When you're drafting legislation, especially legislation like this, I understand why the drafters maybe didn't seek out advice of everybody, every industry, because they kind of know the answer, right? People don't want to be affected by this, and if you start cutting away at it, it's not going to be effective.
Are we going to see that? We already mentioned, we'll see how things work through. Can we get this through in the next couple of weeks? And will it be a dramatic change from what we see now? Or will it be pretty similar to what we see now?
I think in a lot of ways 2 weeks may seem short to the public at large, but for those of us who have been through the process, a lot can happen in 2 weeks, a lot can happen in a few days. So I would think that with the power of the leadership behind it, it has a likely chance of passing. I always get concerned when we do major legislation in especially when we're looking at tax law, looking at 2007 and what happened with the flat tax and then what happened subsequently with the recession. Those are also things that give me some concerns.
Well, and also I think it's important to note that although this may change, currently there is a delayed effective date. So we're going to, even if we passed the bill this session, we're going to give a year to people to figure out how to come into compliance before we start implementing the actual tax, and we can come back and tweak things if we need to.
Let's move on to another big issue throughout the week. Two abortion bills. One, banning abortion on the basis of Down syndrome diagnosis. That passed the Senate, so it's on its way to the governor's office. In the House, a ban 18 weeks and after on abortion, passing the House, and now going over to you and your colleagues in the Senate. Rebecca, let's start with you. Your thoughts on those two bills?
Yeah. Well, I always have concerns when we're looking at the full scope of reproductive health care for women. Like to defer to the women, their providers, their families, their partners to make those very often very difficult decisions. I need to learn a little bit more about some of the exemptions because I also have concerns with victims of rape and incest. I know that there are some carve-outs there, but it always concerns me when we might possibly re-victimize victims of rape and incest who might have to out themselves when they're in those circumstances to be able to verify or to qualify for termination of pregnancy when they're in a very sad situation.
Senator, you are the Senate sponsor of the 18-week bill.
I am.
Your thoughts?
Well, and I think Rebecca makes a very good point about being sensitive to people who have been victims. And I think that the bill does that. It keeps all of those exemptions in place. There's no limit there, no new limits anyway on rape or incest or the health of the life of the mother. In fact, it actually includes a new exemption, which is for severe fetal brain defect, which would leave the child in a vegetative state. So that's exempted out of the 18-week. And the woman still has the ability to have an elective abortion up until 18 weeks.
Even legislative attorneys are saying, look, from a constitutionality standpoint, there could be trouble here. This could end up in court. Your thoughts on it ending up in litigation ultimately?
Probably likely. I think we'll have to see what happens with other states that are passing similar legislation. Sometimes you have organizations that will tackle that with all of the states that seem to be testing the waters related to the constitutionality of legislation like this. You know, I've been involved in this issue for many, many years, for decades, in terms of protection of women's access to full reproductive health options, and so we'll just have to see what happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is challenged.
We should mention the Down syndrome
Yes.
bill does have already something in place to where it will not go into effect until after we see how it plays out.
Correct. That one
states.
has a contingent effective date. So pending any litigation that's currently happening, our law doesn't really go into effect until that one plays out. So and this bill was introduced last year by the same two sponsors, and the main difference besides the contingent effective date on that one is the fact that the doctor's penalty was taken out.
So real quick, we have about 30 seconds left. In the event that the other one does go into the court system and becomes the one the Supreme Court takes up in the state, in the country, do you believe spending $2, $3, maybe $1 million is worth that?
I think there are a lot of people in this state who would agree that a few $1 million is worth it to save the life of many unborn children.
Okay, your thoughts?
I think that we look at many issues, policy issues that are life and death decisions for our community. This is one of them. There are others that I think that should have paramount importance.
All right, our time has flown by. Appreciate having you here. Very important conversation. Thanks so much. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.